Banded together from remote galaxies are 13 of the most sinister villains of all time, the Legion of Doom. Dedicated to a single objective, the conquest of the universe. Only one group dares to challenge this intergalactic threat.
Is Magneto really a villain? And you'll decide by the time we're done with this, and hopefully you'll do your own studying and find out what your opinion is of Magneto. So, just so you know, I've showed this book at length because it is very important. It is X-Men #1 is the first appearance of Magneto. Came out in 1963, all right? Magneto wasn't always Magneto, okay? Magneto was born to a family during the Nazi era. And there's two different stories that Magneto manifested his abilities, okay? He was, what they said, he was Polish, and during the wars in Auschwitz, he was disbanded from his family. And in the movies, you saw that his mutant ability manifested in when he was being separated from his parents. Not necessarily true in the comic books, from what I understood. He didn't manifest his mutant ability till later on, which was pretty neat. In the X-Men books, you know, for 20 years, he was used very sparingly, maybe 2 or 3 times a year into story arcs. But I do have some really cool books that I want to show you and talk about some of his powers and stuff that you might find very interesting, all right? In 1984, we had a huge change in the perception of Magneto, but it was always kind of underwritten, all right? Magneto was born Eric Lenscher, and even that is questionable. So what I did is, you know, back in the day, I'm an old school collector. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have, Wikipedia or Google to look up anything. So when you were a kid, my age, you'd have to use the Marvel Universe. And I'll show these books every time I talk about a character because this is where I got the information from when I was a kid. What's really unique about these books is that it's, 1 or 2 pages about your favorite character, and it is always drawn by different artists. Magneto, I apologize, I forgot who he was drawn by. Not one of my favorite artists, with John Byrne, Dave Cockrum, John Romita. Not one of those, I forgot who it was. But in this, it talks about his powers and his abilities. What I thought was really neat, when it talked about, Magneto had 3 children. He had a wife, his name was Magma, her name was Magma, and his powers didn't mutate until he was with her, and something kind of came out and it really stressed him out, and she bugged out. They did have a child, a baby that was that died at a very, very young age, which I think is what they tried to do in the second version of the X-Men First Class when they talked about Eric and his wife and his daughter getting killed. But from what I understand, his daughter in the comic books, according to this, from what I read, died at a very young age. That's when his power started to manifest, all right? So what I thought was really unique was we all know that Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are the children of Magneto. But there was a time where Magda actually had to go to these mountains, which you can read up in more detail, and had to hide the children. And it was when High Evolutionary got involved with this. So there is a small backstory between High Evolutionary, Magneto, and his children. High Evolutionary actually hid the children from Magneto based on what Magda was saying, on her fear of, just the uncertainty of what Magneto would do or what he would do. All right. In X-Men #1, Magneto tries to take over a military base, which is kind of always what he's trying to do, and the X-Men thwart that. And it's just a great read. You can read it. I've read it 100 times over in reprints and stuff like that. But his powers are limitless to where he draws his magnetic field from. It's undetermined whether or not he actually gets it from the magnetic core or whether or not he self-generates it. But at this point, his powers are limitless, and what he can do with those powers, just to give you an idea, at one point, he was able to pick up from 300 feet away a 30,000-ton freighter, okay? And in other storylines, you'll see how he takes the nuclear missiles and puts them in space, creates Asteroid M, which was really cool. Magneto's had his henchmen, and I've shown this book before. This is X-Men #4. This is the first appearance of the Brotherhood of Mutants, or Evil Mutants, whichever way you deem that worthy. All right. This is where Magneto gets his crew together. At this point, Magneto, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver don't know that Magneto's their father. That came out later on in other books. All right. What was pretty neat is that we have which I think is really cool, Asteroid M, right? Asteroid M goes through the Stan Lee era all the way through the Jim Lee era, and it was always kind of cool to see all the stories that they did around Asteroid M. But Asteroid M was first introduced and destroyed, so first appearance and death, in X-Men number 5 right here. This is a great book. And in this book, it gives credit. You can read the history about it, and it'll talk about how Asteroid M was created and destroyed in this. All right. Cool book. A lot of fun to have. What else can I tell you? I do have some of my notes right here. Let me see. Magneto has tried to recruit many different types of people. In early issues, he tried to recruit Eunice, the Untouchable. Not so much. Great book if you ever read it. He tries to get the Blob, who then later joins the Brotherhood in like 141, 142, which very pivotal issues. And he also tries to get Namor involved, but Namor's too proud. He's too stubborn. The two of them ultimately clash, and he's like, look, I'm the Prince of Atlantis. I don't need this in my life. So he leaves. So there's some real good, cool stuff about that. X-Men 103, 104, it's kind of implied. So in these storylines, there's always kind of implications. 102, 103, 104, there's stories about how Eric the Red and Magneto are kind of working in unison and stuff like that. So Magneto's always behind the scenes. But there isn't until, and I didn't realize this, there isn't until X-Men 150, which, to quote my boy Tivo, I had to go digging in my long boxes to pull this up. And when I was filming this, I had to pull it up to show you guys. This is first of all, it's an anniversary issue. X-Men 150, done by my favorite artist, Dave Cockrum, and Chris Claremont, of course. In this is where Magneto really shows that he's not a nice guy, okay? He does what he does, not for humans, for the salvation of all Homo superiors, which are mutants, okay? This is where, Charles Xavier is for the good of all mankind. Magneto is like, no, we are, because of what he went through in Auschwitz and what he saw during the Nazi regime and stuff like that, and traveling the world as a gypsy, he says that we are the future, not them, Charles. We are Homo superiors, and if you're a Homo sapien, you are beneath me. So that ultimately is this entire relationship between Charles and Magneto. And like I said, if you watch my previous episode about Charles Xavier, I touched on that a little bit. This story really shows the ability of Charles and how powerful he is. He actually takes a Russian sub and destroys it, okay? Kills everybody in the sub. Then he destroys an entire Russian town. So at this point, Magneto has gone off the chains. He's completely ballistic. And this is just great reading. You could probably find this for $5-10 in a long box. And it's really neat. Some of the stuff that I printed out about it was that this is where he gets his nuclear missiles, okay? He takes the nuclear missiles and then decides that he's going to keep them for his own personal arsenal, right? And later on, you'll hear about the Magneto Protocol and all that other stuff, and how the government doesn't know what to do because Magneto in space has got nuclear missiles just poised to destroy anything. But listen, don't bother him, man. Don't bother him. I'm above you guys. I'm literally above you guys in Asteroid M, which he rebuilds, and that's pretty neat. So in this book, Magneto, Storm, Cyclops, they have a huge standoff. Kitty Pryde gets involved, and just a great storyline. Then, I don't know what came first. This is what I thought was really, really interesting. And I didn't pick this up as a kid. I do have this, but I didn't understand this as a kid. In Secret Wars, which I have somewhere buried in my back room, and I apologize for not pulling it off. In Secret Wars Well, the story of the Secret Wars is the Beyonder, right, who was an omnipotent being. This was under Jim Shooter's helm at Marvel. He creates this 12-issue story arc. Obviously, Secret Wars 8, we know to be most popular, but there are other great stories in there. There's an epic cover with Doctor Doom. There's Magneto. There's Hulk holding this gigantic piece of planet above everybody else. So if you haven't read Secret Wars, go get it in omnibus. Go get it in trade paperback. It's a must-read for any Marvel fan. If you haven't read it, then shame on you. So, but in Secret Wars, when they bring him together with everybody, he actually brings Beyonder, classifies Magneto, in his opinion, as one of the good guys, right? So at this point, we realize, hey, Magneto, according to the Beyonder, is not a bad guy, right? He's not for the death of the entire world. He doesn't want to see he doesn't want it to fall under his own power. He is for the good of mutants. So very, very interesting, and shame on me as a comic book collector for not identifying that and having to learn that through the research that I did and everything like that. So that issue was, I don't know which one it was. It doesn't really say on this one, but it's pretty neat because that's kind of cool. And Magneto does go toe-to-toe with a lot of characters in this book and stuff like that. And again, Magneto's persona has always been the same, whoever is writing him. And that's pretty neat about that. Then we have very iconic covers, another anniversary issue. So 50 issues later, probably 3.5, 4 years later. So we can see from X-Men number 1 to X-Men 200, which I'm going to show you in a second, a very big, a huge evolution of Eric Lenscher Magneto. Okay, this anniversary issue right here, double-sized issue, X-Men 200, done cover and artwork done by John Romita Jr. Just a classic cover where we see Magneto in shackles. Now Magneto is on trial. Okay, he is on trial for many of his crimes. Okay, but ultimately the proceedings get abandoned, and this is where they have to fight against Baron von Strucker's children. But Magneto is on trial, and during this time, Professor X gets really, really hurt, and he's taken away, I think it's by Lilandra or stuff like that. And now this is where we have an internal fight where we don't have a leader for the X-Men. This is, you'll see in X-Men 201, I believe, that is where Cyclops and Storm have to battle it out for the finding out who the leader is and who will ultimately lead them. And Magneto is left to lead the team. Now, if you're Cyclops, right? If you're Cyclops, you were like, no way, man. Magneto has tried to kill me, for 200 issues. And it's Magneto trying to explain his personal beliefs and what he's trying to do to the X-Men and trying to follow under his rule. Now, there was a great quote in this right here. Now, this is not my own words. I'm not quoting it. Magneto, he's the most legendary foe, and he's their greatest ally. He's, the X-Men's most legendary foe and their greatest ally. Why? Because they're mutants. But I believe in, the benefit of all mutants, not humans. So this is really kind of the whole storyline. And then as you go through it, you'll have a lot more story arcs, which came out in the modern age, which I didn't really collect. But the Jim Lee story arc was great, where he was sitting on his throne. He's older. Jim Lee did a great version of him. And now he's truly on Asteroid M, where he's completely built, and that's his safe haven. You've got all the other characters that are starting to come out in that storyline and stuff like that. Great reads. But, that's a little bit about Magneto. To wrap it up, is Magneto good or bad? I'll leave that to your opinion. Is Magneto incredibly powerful? He absolutely is. Do I believe that his interpretation in all the movies, in Days of Future Past, in X-Men 1, in X-Men First Class, did the movie producers do a great job bringing him to life? Absolutely. I think Fassbender was a great young Magneto. I also think that Ian McKellen did a great older version of him in Days of Future Past when they brought them both together. I think it's great. Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, obviously, are best friends in the real world, but McAvoy, all four of them did a great job bringing the yin and yang of these characters to life. At the ends of 3, I think, of X-Men 3, you see that Charles and Magneto were playing chess. That doesn't really happen in the comic books, but that's their interpretation of how, they are still good friends, even though their beliefs aren't the same. Why this was important to me is because my middle name is Otto, and my grandfather was German. My grandfather and my grandmother spent their entire lives moving away from the Nazi regime in Germany, and going through Poland and through Lithuania, and then ultimately coming to the United States. Just a little bit about me. So when I would hear stories that my great aunts and uncles that came to this country, that made it to this country, would talk about Auschwitz, it was really important to me. So just a real world fact about me and my relationship with this character and how I've seen him evolve. And if I was going to talk about my favorite villains of all time in different comic books and different genres, it would have to be Magneto, Cobra Commander, Magneto, Cobra Commander, the Joker, Skeletor, and Megatron. All right, so those would probably be my favorite villains of all time. But I'm getting a little bit off task. Guys, please comment. If I made any mistakes, I apologize. Correct me. Follow me on Lords of the Long Box. Follow me on 3 Men in a Basement. Please sub both of those channels up if you don't do. Tell your friends about it. Again, I'm no expert. I'm a fanboy first and foremost, but I thoroughly enjoy doing this.